Welcome to our 37th Salon on maternal gift economy, Breaking Through series. The Salon is hosted by International Feminists for a Gift Economy. Today's topic is about the gifts of communication, speaking, and listening. I am Elena Skoko, your moderator today. I am replacing Letitia Layson, our mistress of ceremony, who could not be here today. We are happy to have Maria Suarez, Selene Aswell, and Genevieve Vaughan with us today. Each of our presenters will speak for 15 to 20 minutes, which will give us ample time for questions and discussion. Today's salon is about the gifts of communication, speaking, and listening. Communication is actually based on giving and receiving, on nurturing with material gifts, verbal gifts, and signs of all kinds. The exchange paradigm does not let us see this and interprets communication abstractly as the transmission of information. Instead, maternal gift economy movement's perspective understands speaking as gifting, satisfying the listener's cognitive and communicative needs, and listening as creative receiving. In our patriarchal capitalist society, the communicative gifts of women and other subordinated groups often remain ungiven, because the gift of listening to them also remains ungiven. This salon gives examples of giving and receiving in nonviolent communication and of the creative gift of listening through the interviews of women. I wish to welcome Genevieve Vaughan, our host and main promoter of the maternal gift economy salons. I will say a few words about Genevieve. She's an independent scholar and theoretician of the maternal gift economy. She is from Texas, but lives her life between Italy and the US. She created the multicultural all-women activist foundation for a compassionate society in Austin that is closed now. She founded the Temple of Sekhmet in the Nevada desert that you can visit. And she also co-created our network, International Feminists for a Gift Economy. Her main books, among others, are For Giving, A Feminist Criticism of Exchange, Homo Donans, and The Gift in the Heart of Language, the Maternal Source of Meaning. Welcome, Jan. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Elena, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm excited to be the communicator today, and I've been trying for many years to give to everyone the idea of the gift economy, and the gift economy that permeates almost everything we do, but we don't actually realize it because we're always looking through the glasses of exchange. These glasses of exchange contradict giving because exchange is another logic that isn't the gift logic. Quid pro quo is giving in order to get back something for yourself. And so it is an ego-oriented interaction, an ego-oriented logic. Unilateral giving to satisfy the need of the other person without a second end involved, without wanting to have to get it back for yourself, is an other-oriented logic that gives to the other receives, and then can give again to someone else, or use that gift. The receiver can use that gift or they can give it again to someone else, especially when they're using something that is so available as verbal language, as sounds that practically everybody can make, everybody can learn when they're children. And that, in fact, is what happens. We nurture children with sounds, as well as with material goods, with milk, and later solid foods. And we nurture them, satisfying their needs of all different kinds of for safety, for being held, for warmth, the proper temperature, for being moved around, for having other experiences in the world, to look at the world together with somebody that cares for them. And there are a multitude of needs that mothers satisfy in daily, moment by moment, for their children. They interpret those needs. They pay attention and interpret those needs and satisfy them. And everybody can actually do that, but it's mostly mothers that do it because they've been socially assigned that job, because they actually give birth to the children, and they have the milk to satisfy their first needs. So society assigns that job to women, to mothers. And when we live in a society based on nuclear families, in a market society, the communities have been reduced to just a few people, the ones in that nuclear family. And so mothers don't have any help. Nobody else nurtures them, usually. Maybe sometimes they are lucky enough to have grandmothers helping them, or aunts, but not always, and it's not the most typical case. And so instead of being in a community, the child is only in relationship with a mother and usually the father is absent, or the mother is able to take the child to some nursery school, and somebody else nurtures the child together with usually a whole lot of other children. So our ways of caring for our little children are pretty distorted in the market society that we live in. Actually, matriarchal societies, indigenous societies had other ways of raising children, with a community that gave to them and that they received from. So the kinds of communication, material communication, that start out life for everybody were, in a sense, better in indigenous and matriarchal societies than they are now in our capitalist market society, which has everyone separated into nuclear families. And that was actually, I believe, better for the nurturing of the personality of the child and for the community itself, because there is more material communication in those kinds of society for everybody. And I'm thinking about Marx's idea of structure and superstructures. The structure he saw as the material way we gain our living. And the superstructure was what he saw as the ideological or the thought-based constructions that come from the material base. So that, in a way, I believe, is that when you have a communicative material base like indigenous societies or matriarchal societies have, then your kind of communication at the verbal level is also more communitary and communicative. Whereas in our society, where people are not communicating on a material level in a good way, because we're separated through the very act of exchange, because we can't get anything from another person free, or sometimes we do, but the main way we communicate materially is through exchange, which contradicts the very idea of gifting. An exchange is not a gift. So we separate ourselves through exchange while we unite through giving and receiving. And the giving and receiving is the maternal way, whereas the exchange way is a neutral, abstract way of relating to each other that separates everybody and puts us in competition with each other to get more gifts, really, to get things cheaper. And so it also fits better with patriarchy, which is an attempt of people, especially men, to be more, get more, and dominate the others. And so you have this whole top-down exchange way where the one that has the most is the most important. And then you have a gift way where there is a sharing and a kind of communication with each other that unites people instead of separating them, and it allows cooperation instead of competition. And of course, cooperation is what we need to do in community. So community is, I believe, the word, at least it expresses this. It may not actually derive from this way, but it does mean, muni means gifting in Latin. Muni means gifts. So community would mean giving gifts together. And so also communication. And in fact, if I've written a lot about communication, and my very first essay that I wrote back in 1981 was called Communication and Exchange. And there I showed that communication is not exchange, and we should not be saying we have an exchange of words or an exchange of communication, because it really isn't. And yet almost everything that you read about communication does call it an exchange. Instead, communication is really based on giving and receiving, and we learn it in our earliest days from our mothers at the material level, and then we learn it also at the verbal level, because we receive the words along with the nurture, and we are nurtured with words by our mothers, and then as we are nurtured by these words, we combine our perspectives so that we see things in the world together, where the mother says, look at the birdie. Well, the little child looks, and both mother and child are receiving the same perception together, and they coordinate their perspective. And that way they share that particular perception. It's a gift for both of them. And you see little children pointing a lot, and so by pointing, they're identifying something in the environment that they have seen, that they want to share that perception with the other people around them. And so the other people look as well. And that is a reception of these gifts of the environment that the child even very young children, as soon as they learn to point, they can already share this perception in the environment with the other people. And they seem to enjoy that a lot, as the adults or other children do. So they can, that is also a way of creating community by sharing things in the environment, sharing something that pops out in the environment for us to look at together. And in fact, I believe a lot of language has to do with sharing those things around us in the environment that pop out, and we point at them with words. Our words are gifts for those gifts of the environment that are out there. And so we can embrace these parts of the environment and the words together as we speak to each other. Sorry, I had my phone dinged, and I'm always the slave of that ding. Anyway, so we create community with other people as we speak, and it is a abstract community, if you like, or at least a verbal community, because it's in another realm than the material community that we're living in, our physical environment. And that is important, though, for us, because that way we share meaning, we share the value of things with each other. Instead, in economic so-called communication, we communicate in order to not share. we communicate in order for each of us to get our own and not share it with the other person. And we also have money by which we evaluate the objects that we want, or the whatever things they are that we are going to use. We evaluate those with money rather than sharing the value of things that we perceive or that we could receive together, like we would receive a meal together that we could share. And so we create different kinds of human relations when we're communicating in a gift way materially, and when we're discommunicating, let's say, in an exchange way. In fact, exchange contradicts gifting, because instead of creating that solidarity of a human relation, it creates a conflictual or individualistic way of being together.
5 minutes.
Okay. And so I believe that we really need, as a society, to begin to understand communication as giving gifts together, as giving and receiving, rather than as an abstract interaction that is just an exchange of information. Information actually means being informed in a form within ourselves. And I believe that form is a form of receiving gifts and giving gifts. That is that one gives to the other. Something is transferred from one person to another. That other person receives what is given. And it doesn't have to be given back, although it can be given forward, or it can eventually be given back. But when children and mothers do that, it's a playful game of giving and receiving. It's imitation. The child's imitating the giving, the maternal giving, not exchanging. It's not quid pro quo. And I think the whole gift paradigm needs to be seen, because it has not been seen. It's been covered over, the more we've done capitalism and patriarchy, the less we've seen gifting. And even though we exploit it, we take from the gift economy all the time, the gift economy of nature. Nature is not quid pro quo. And we need a whole revision of our way of seeing things, because we are the receivers of the gifts of nature, and we need to be able to communicate with nature and communicate in the sense that we're creatively receiving nature's gifts that are free to us, and that we are not exchanging with nature, and we're not commodifying nature and abstracting it and taking it away from everybody else, as well as from the other creatures. So really, nature is mother, and we need to create an epistemology, a philosophy, all having to do with this gifting. And it has been eliminated from patriarchal philosophy and divided up into small categories of morality, or just calling it altruism. We're all altruism. Everybody is other oriented. You have to be, otherwise you die. Or that's not who you are as a human being. All humans have to be able to receive from others and give. And every time we move, we're giving signs to other people. We're communicating in nonverbal signs, so we can't not give. And other people receive all of these communications. Anyway, so I think that we need a revision of our idea of communication and basing it on gifting. And we need to base it on the maternal gift economy, not just a gift economy in general, but we need to find the root of what we're doing as human beings in the relation that we all have to have when we are nurtured unilaterally by other people, whether that is actually your mother or your grandmother or your sister or brother or your father or whoever it is. All of that is the human way, that is the material communication from the beginning of gifting, giving and receiving. And the exchange way comes much later, and it is not the original human way, even though we always seem to interpret it in that way. So that's why I have, for so many years, been working on this idea of gifting in communication and in mothering, because I think our society has just gone way off the board in its understanding of who we are as human beings. And so that is what is creating the terrible, disastrous relation to the environment that we've had, and that is destroying the earth and destroying one another. Why do we not give and receive with all of the people who are trying to escape from the environmental disasters? That's because we have an exchange economy that's pushing us into our tremendous egotism. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and it's now another turn.
Thank you so much, Jen, for your wisdom. It's really, really precious. So if you have any questions for Jen, please write them in the Q&A box. So I see you have been saying hello and where you're from, and we welcome all your chats. And if you have questions, write them in the Q&A box. We will address them at the end of all presentations. I wish to introduce the second guest of our today's salon. I welcome Selene Aswell. I will briefly introduce Selene and her work. She is a nonviolent communication facilitator, gift economy coach, and community living consultant. Her goal is to contribute to the co-creation of a needs-based regenerative culture. Her work is focused on needs consciousness raising and integrating nonviolence into human relationships. She is a certification candidate through the Center for Nonviolent Communication with 9 years of personal practice in this field. Selene has a BA in Community Studies. She is a community member and a provider apprentice at the Nonviolent Global Liberation online community. Welcome, Selene.
Hello, thank you. I think that you, let's start from the beginning. I'd like to invite you all to take a moment with me to pause and self-connect. So I'm going to take a moment to pause and self-connect as well. I'm going to close my eyes and I invite you as well just to take a moment to breathe with me. And just to notice what's happening inside yourself. What feelings or thoughts or longings are moving through you. And if we were in conversation, I would invite you to share. So I will share what's alive in me. Briefly, I'm noticing in me some nervousness and a longing to really contribute to a global awareness of the gift economy and the gifts of communication, and kind of some thoughts around wanting to do a good job. The other thing I think I want to share to support myself in coming forward and speaking with you today is that I'm currently in a state of depletion. I'm on the edge of burnout, and I have actually been taking a break. So this is a break from my break to speak with you today. And so I haven't prepared as much as I usually would want to prepare. And I haven't made any visuals. I haven't even written out a speech. I'm experimenting and speaking from the heart. And I wanted to make this visible to you, also to help my nervous system to settle. By sharing it with you, it's less for me to hold alone. And I want to ask you to keep this in mind as you listen to me, and to bring, if it's at all possible, to bring tenderness and compassion to me as you're listening, as I'm sharing. And I will ask the same for myself, to bring as much tenderness for how I am in this moment to myself as I'm sharing. Yeah, so having said that, I notice I'm feeling more settled and more open-hearted to share with you. So I want to, Genevieve invited me to share about the gifts of communication from a nonviolent communication perspective. So I hope to do that, merging my understanding of nonviolent communication and my understanding of the gift economy, and how they are, in my thoughts, pretty much the same thing. So I want to start by sharing that, as Genevieve was saying, communication itself is a gift. It's a gift that we offer and a gift that we can receive. And in NVC, we have 3 components to communication. So what has been referred to as speaking, listening, and also self-connection. So we all together already have done all 3 of those modes of communication, modes of being. we together, I'm hoping you paused with me and took a moment to connect with yourself, to see what you were feeling, to see what was happening in your body. And then we express that, we speak that, we share that, as I modeled, as I did with you, sharing what is authentically in me. And then we also listen, we receive that, as I am imagining you're listening to me. I think you haven't probably turned off your computers. I'm guessing you're listening. And so we're doing these 3 phases together now. And I want to just briefly touch on how each of these phases is a gift. So when we self-connect, I think I want to speak, when we self-connect, we are connecting with what's alive in us, is what we say in nonviolent communication, but we're connecting with life itself within us. We're connecting with our bodies, with whatever it is that we need in the moment. And then when we speak, we are moving towards authentic expression. So in nonviolent communication, rather than calling it speaking, we actually call it, some people call it honest expression. I like to call it vulnerable expression, because it's an invitation to dropping into a deeper layer within what I'm sharing. And I think in the world around us, in the patriarchal world that we live in, we may not actually be sharing vulnerably. We may not actually be sharing honestly. We may be sharing at a more of a safer level or a superficial level. A lot of small talk about the weather or sports might be happening. And so we want to invite dropping into a more vulnerable sharing. And so vulnerable expression, it might not actually be even speaking what the gift of that communication is, as Genevieve was saying. It could be, something in your eyes expressing. It could be something in your body language expressing. I have been, I've had the pleasure of spending the past few weeks with a toddler. So there is a lot of nonverbal expressing happening that I think is part of our innate humanness. And so the invitation within nonviolent communication is to offer the gifts of your authenticity. So when we're expressing, we're not just offering the gifts of our words, we're offering the gift of our realness, of what is within us. We're offering the gifts of what is in our hearts. We're offering the gift of our authenticity, and so many other gifts that I'm not going to name right now. But I would like to invite you, when you are catching yourself expressing what's alive in you, or expressing what is moving through you, or receiving someone else's expression, you could, as a practice to anchor gift economy more deeply into your consciousness, you could actually take a moment to see, like, what is the gift that's being offered to me within this communication. So expressing itself, speaking itself, sharing what's going on inside you is a gift that we offer. And we can also offer the gift of our listening. So in nonviolent communication, we like to call it actually receiving. So we're very aware of the gift that is within communication. I am giving you my sharing, and you are giving me your listening. You're receiving, we're actually calling it empathic receiving. I'm aware that the thing that you're sharing with me, whether it's challenging or hard to hear, or I even genuinely feel upset with what you've said, that still is a gift that you're giving me. You're giving me your authenticity, you're giving me your aliveness. And I want to, as part of my nonviolence practice, as part of my practice of anchoring gift consciousness, I want to receive with as open a heart as I possibly can. I want to receive the gifts that you're giving me. And so instead of calling it listening, we're calling it receiving. We're calling it empathic receiving, because I may be doing more than just listening with my ears when I'm in a receptive state. As Genevieve has said, the act of receiving a gift is not passive, it's active. We're actively receiving. So I may ask clarifying questions to support my understanding of the gift that you're communicating to me. I may note your body language. I may offer a hug. There's a whole range of things that I can do when I'm practicing empathic receiving that aren't necessarily listening. So the focus is on receiving actively the gifts that the other person is offering through their sharing. And then the third mode, self-connection, is alive, we hope, and we practice in both of those modes. So what is it that I'm sharing when I am expressing myself? I'm sharing what I discovered through self-connection. I'm sharing what is alive in me. And when I'm receiving someone, I'm also staying self-connected so that I am it's part of that active receiving. The gifts that are being communicated to me are like seeds that can be planted in me, and I might change. I might become a different person, or what I'm wanting or needing might shift based on what is being communicated to me. So I want to be actively self-connected while I'm in a state of receiving the other person's gifts. And the last thing that I want to say about self-connection is it's actually a moment of expressing to myself and receiving myself. So the listening and the speaking is happening. It's just that I'm receiving myself. So if you're interested in exploring a practice of nonviolence, a really beautiful, simple place to start is practicing self-connection, listening to what's going on inside yourself, sharing it with yourself, and receiving yourself unconditionally. So I'm just going to take a pause there, practicing pausing before switching topics. The second thing that I wanted to say about the gifts of communication is that first, communication itself is a gift that we offer. I'm giving you what's alive in me. I'm giving you my authenticity, and I'm receiving you. I'm receiving your listening, and you're giving me the gift of your listening. Just like I'm giving you the gift of my sharing, and you're receiving the gift of my sharing. And authentically communicating and receiving what's alive in someone, that gift, giving and receiving that gift of communication actually creates pathways for more gift giving to happen. So if we talk about the maternal gift economy as caring for the needs alive in us, whether that be an adult caregiver taking care of a child, or whether that's in an adult relationship, or within a community, or between myself and the planet, all of these flows of gifting happen because we're communicating our needs. A mother or a mothering person can more accurately attune to the needs that are alive in the person that they're caring for when the needs are communicated. And like I said, I've been hanging out with a toddler, so I've been able to observe how clearly, or if not clearly where we can understand it, but how voraciously children communicate their needs. And they don't necessarily have words for them yet, but they are loud. Their body language shows the needs, and all of us orient towards attending to those needs because the communication is happening. And I would say that communication is happening all the time, and we may not just be noticing it. I think that it's one of the impacts of living in a patriarchal society that we kind of get a bit more numb to the needs around us. We get a bit more numb to the expression of needs that are constantly happening. And so what I've noticed with living with this toddler is that they will express their needs, and maybe I don't notice because I'm doing something else or we're talking or something, and they will express their needs again and again and again, and escalating in volume until someone notices and responds to them, and they get what it is that they're looking for, whatever that need in that moment is, whether it's a material need like wanting to drink water, or whether it's a relational need like just wanting to be acknowledged. And then they're complete, and they're back to whatever they're doing. They're no longer escalating in volume. And I think that's true for us all the time, whether it's our bodies escalating in volume with what they're communicating, which is happening with my body, as I maybe wasn't noticing it telling me that I needed to take a break or I needed to slow down, and I kept going. And so my body's expression of its needs have escalated in volume until I can't ignore it anymore. And I think that we could say that the same thing is happening with the planet, where the expression of needs is escalating in volume until we can't ignore it anymore, or until we respond, or until something shifts.
5 minutes.
Thank you. So what I want to share is that there are so many expressions of life energy that we in NVC call universal human needs. And I would say that all of those needs, whether it's a need for acceptance or belonging, or whether it's a material need for warmth or shelter, or to be fed and nourished, that all of these needs are able to be attended to, are able to be met through the gift of communication, through whether it's our bodies communicating to us and asking for nourishment, through hunger pangs, or whether it's in communicating in a relationship that you would maybe really like a hug. So the gifts of communication enable the flow of other gifts. This is what I wanted to share about the gift of communication. And I would like to just invite you in closing. I think the tragedy of living within a patriarchal society, or living with people who were raised in a patriarchal society, is that somewhere along the line, that innocence of authentically expressing that we did as children somehow gets lost. And we start to hold back. Maybe we received messages that our authenticity wasn't wanted, or maybe we received messages subconsciously that we somehow interpreted that our needs didn't matter, or that people wouldn't want to give to us. And so we are less likely to fully put our needs and feelings and wants and experiences visibly out for people to see. And that's a self-protection, to hold that in. But the tragedy is that we actually then reduce the amount of gifts that can flow to us, because we're not sharing what's going on inside of us. And people want to be giving to us. This is what Genevieve was saying. It's my firm belief that the core of human nature is giving and receiving, that we want to give to each other, and that we crave to receive gifts from others. And so the tragedy of not expressing authentically, the tragedy of holding in our needs and feelings and what's alive in us, means that we're receiving less gifts than we might receive if we were sharing. So I want to invite you, as a practice of anchoring gift economy into your life, to explore the edges in a way that feels like a safe stretch. I don't want you to overstretch and harm yourselves before you're ready, but in a stretch that feels good, like a learning stretch. I want to invite you to find the edges of the places where you're holding back a little bit, where you're not quite being authentic, where you're kind of hiding something that you want from the people in your life, or something that you're longing for. And I want to invite you to dare to express that. And it might be awkward, it might be bumpy. You can let people know that you're trying this out and just see what happens. Remember that letting people know what you want and what you're longing for, what you need, how you're feeling, what you're thinking. Remember that that's a gift that you're offering, even if they don't do anything different. Even if the only gift they give you is the gift of listening to you, you're still receiving gifts that you wouldn't receive if you kept that inside, if you stayed alone with it. So I want to invite you to risk to share what's alive in you and remember that it's a gift that you're offering, and then see if anything different happens, if maybe you are surprised by what life flows back to you. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Selene. It was really moving, and thank you for sharing your experience and for inviting us to do the same. I was really touched. I wish to introduce now Maria Suarez. She was already our guest at our salons. I will briefly introduce her. Maria Suarez Toro is a feminist journalist, an activist in defense of human rights, and an educator. She was born in Puerto Rico and has been a resident of San Jose, Costa Rica, for close to 50 years. She was a co-director and co-founder of the Feminist International Radio Endeavor, acronym FIRE, from 1991 to 2011. She worked as an educator in literacy in many countries in Central America during the 70s and the 80s. Since 1998, she has been an associate professor of communication at the University of Denver. Since 2011, she has been a correspondent for Haiti, Puerto Rico, and Costa Rica for the news service for the women of Latin America and the Caribbean, Servicio de Noticias de la Mujer de Latinoamérica y el Caribe. And since 2015, Maria has been a coordinator of the Community Center Diving Ambassadors of the South Caribbean Sea, Centro Comunitario de Buceo Embajadores y Embajadoras del Mar del Caribe Sur, which is dedicated to archaeological diving and recovery of the history of the Afro-descendant population on the coast of Costa Rica. Welcome, Maria.
Great to be here, and thank you for inviting me to speak in these salons. It's always very enriching, but I have to tell you that I had prepared a talk that I have totally changed from listening to Selene and to Genevieve today. And I am going to improvise in order to give a testimony and an example, all anyway, based on the experience of Feminist International Radio Endeavor, which is the talk that I was asked to address about the gift of communication. But I am going to shift to do it from a very testimonial perspective of how what Genevieve and Selene have talked about has played a role in what FIRE, Feminist International Radio Endeavor, and myself as a gift of nature have been able to do because of the way that this radio program was organized by Genevieve, who was its creator. Let me begin by telling you that I learned very early on in the production of Feminist International Radio Endeavor way back in 1991, when I began interviewing feminists and women around the world for the radio program on shortwave at a time when we didn't have internet communication. It was quite an endeavor to have a voice, a feminist voice in a radio station that aired internationally. It was an endeavor in 1991. Today, it's, it happens all the time with technology and the internet. But at that time, it was the only one. And it was created by Genevieve and the Foundation for a Compassionate Society as a way to give a voice to women worldwide, precisely as a gift. One of the interviews that changed my perspective about the gift of communication in the maternal way was the interview that I did with Elizabeth Sajotorius in 1992 during the Earth Summit, where I first went as a fire correspondent to interview women in that international conference about the planet. And Elizabeth Sajotorius, for those of you who don't know her, is the author of an amazing book, Gaia, Human Journey from Chaos to Cosmos. She followed suit on James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis at that time, now a theory about the Earth as a living unit. And when I interviewed her, she explained to me that what we call maternal language really means the one language that we learn with the feelings and the emotions of caring, of nature, being nurtured, and of being able to become socially the relational beings that we are as the human species in this planet. And that was amazing to me, because as a bilingual person in Spanish and English, I was able to understand the difference and the connection that I had to make about communicating in Spanish and communicating in English. Here I was doing 2 hours of international program, one in English and one in Spanish, one in my maternal language that I learned with the feelings. Why is that important? Because the foundational gift of communications that both Genevieve and Selene have been talking about, the foundational dimension that is learned through the mother tongue, through the relationship with our mother, has the holism that we lose, as Selene said many times, with the way that we use language in a different way, but we learned it in a holistic way that had the connection of the feelings, the emotions, of the nurturing, but also of the caring in that nurturing. Not only nurturing, but we learn the relational communication of being cared for and caring by communicating back in that relationship, and also all the rest that comes with it. Learning to communicate, to be able to develop the gregariousness that is part of our nature. As Selene was saying, we are communicative human beings. We cannot survive alone. We are a very vulnerable species in many ways that I will not explain, because you can read about that. But we learn that by understanding holistically and living holistically the gift of communication with all of that perspective. Mainly the one that only comes from the mother is the one that has to do with the emotion of the language. It doesn't mean that other languages don't allow you to communicate, but if you are conscious about that, you will also relate in other languages by enhancing the way in which language is used to love and care for each other. And I highlight that because it was a major knowledge that I learned from Elizabeth Sajotorius, therefore understanding that what was going to be the experience of being one of the producers of Feminist International Radio Endeavor was going to be no more than, no less than listening to women who didn't have a voice internationally talking about these other perspectives that were not part of the books, of the written history, and of the communication that existed in the world at that moment. And I spent 20 years of my life listening to women of all walks of life in all countries, in all kinds of settings, listening and talking to women about perspectives that were not found anywhere else. And that was the biggest gift. The second biggest gift is the gift that came from Genevieve in the way that she envisioned and organized this, so that little Maria Suarez and Catalina Fossi, who started this program in Costa Rica, without even getting together with her, would understand immediately that this was her gift to the women's movement, her gift to us in Costa Rica, and her gift to the world and the planet about creating an international venue where women could have a voice about all issues and could have a voice not in the commodification and the commercialization of communications, but in the feminist communication that enhances all of what we have been talking about. How did she do it? And this is where I have changed, because I wasn't going to talk about that, but that's precisely what I have to talk about, because we hear Genevieve talking about all her theories, and we don't know how she has grounded it in her practice and her experience. And that's what I want to talk about, because Feminist International Radio, and there was not any radio program. I said to you, it was the first international radio venue where the feminist movement was able to have a voice, and that's in itself is enough. But it was a radio program that she designed in a way that we would learn very quickly what it was all about in relationship to her concept about the gift of language and of communication. What did Genevieve do? It was really amazing. And I have to tell you that it was, I didn't know what to do with her and with this at the very beginning. Why? Because I became a journalist after. What Genevieve, the first thing, I said, Genevieve, you're inviting me to start a radio program tomorrow, the next day, in English and in Spanish, but I'm not a journalist. She said, I don't want a journalist. I want a feminist. Precisely, I don't want a journalist. And I understood much later that what she meant is that she didn't want anybody who had to deconstruct and undo the learning of communication that we learned at the university. I went to the university afterwards to study communications just to understand, to be able to communicate with women journalists around the world who we were relating to that had a language that I couldn't understand. She said, I don't want that. I want a feminist that is committed to communicating and articulating the experiences and the perspectives of women in this channel in international communication. Okay, so then I'll do it. So the next day I was starting in the radio. And the next surprise is that I wasn't going to meet Genevieve for the next 9 months or 10 months. And I was always, she had hired me with no contract, just an understanding of what she wanted. And she didn't know whether I agreed with it or she didn't care, because she created a context just like mothers do. She created a context where Katerina, who was my other colleague, and I would understand what she envisioned that this was going to be all about. We could be in agreement or not, but we lived it, and we lived it with such emotional gratitude, emotional enthusiasm. Why? Because as third world women in Costa Rica, going through at that time the end of the dictatorships, and as a literacy teacher, having understood in going throughout Nicaragua during the revolution, Guatemala, Honduras, doing adult literacy, I was coming back in 1991 when Genevieve approached me to begin FIRE. I was coming back desperate because I had understood for the last 15 years that people who were illiterate in the countryside of my countries in Central America, living the worst of dictatorships, had a wealth of knowledge, especially the women, a wealth of knowledge that they expressed in the literacy classes that I couldn't find anywhere else. I couldn't find it in books. I couldn't find it in history. I couldn't find it in media. I couldn't find it anywhere. I found it in the classrooms teaching these people to read and write. And I was desperate when I came back. I went to work in the Human Rights Commission because I thought, if people have human rights, then they will be able to express all of this that has proposals and alternatives to what is happening in the world that is going to be heard. And then Genevieve calls me and she offers me the gift of a microphone 2 hours a day to be able to convene women around the world to have a voice about their own perspectives, free of censorship, free of anything that thwarts the communication the way that Selene was talking about, that we have a tendency to forget. I cannot even say hired, because Genevieve also created a group of women, Cici Fahrenhold, Frida Worden, women from different parts of the world that we would meet once a week in a conference call that was also revolutionary. Now you can do it all the time, but she would get 10 women together in a conference call and we would talk about it. So then my question to Genevieve was, Genevieve, how often do we have to report back to you of what we're doing? She said, I don't want any reports from you. I will know what you are doing because I am part of the same movement. And I said to Catalina, we don't even have to spend time in bureaucracy. She said, all I expect of you is that you help to build the communication venue that women need internationally so that people can hear the gifts of language of women. And of course, you know, I had that and I acquired it from my mother and I acquired it from a lot of women, but we have a tendency to forget it. And I was learning in the feminist movement to undo the learning that we do in the patriarchal system. So I became, I couldn't call myself a journalist. I met Jen maybe 10 months afterwards, and she had put this amazing responsibility and opportunity and gift in our hands. And in a way that she did it that allowed us to understand that it was a gift, that it wasn't a job, that it wasn't it wasn't a task, but it was the gift of being able to bring out all of these perspectives that women have that are nowhere to be found. And so then I met the women of the Foundation for a Compassionate Society. I went to Austin. I met Genevieve really in the Earth Summit. Yes, about 10, in the preparations for the Earth Summit in Florida, about 10 months after we were already hired without any contract or anything, doing the best we could and using the opportunity and understanding what this was all about, both from the experience that she created with us as adults, but also that I was able to tap into from the learning experience that I had, because I already was an activist that was doing a lot of volunteer work. That I spent 4 years in the wars in El Salvador and Nicaragua doing adult literacy with no salary, with no, just what we could eat and find, so that communities could have a learning experience. So it's the life experience that Selene was talking about came all together in that process. And I want to highlight that because people have to understand that Genevieve in this process has walked her talk in a way that you either have to agree, you can disagree, but you understand very quickly, because it's the same way that none of us have to be explained how our mothers taught us the gift of communications, because when we tap into how we lived it, when we were born, before we were born, and during the first stages of the foundations of our lives, if we tap into that any moment in our life, we can understand it and make a decision. It's a political decision. It's not an abstraction. It's a political decision about we ourselves are the gift of nature to the planet as human beings, and we have the choice of continue messing it up or being able to tap into it in the constructive ways of alternatives that honor that we are a gift of nature to this planet, and that's what we came here to do. And if we find our ways, and thank you, Genevieve, for helping us find ours.
Thank you, Maria. I was moved again. It's really very emotional to learn about your experiences within the maternal gift economy movement, actually, that existed since so many years. Very inspiring. Thank you so much, Maria. So I wish to open for Q&A. Finally, I thank all the presenters. And first, I would like to invite everyone to switch on your cameras so we can actually have an open gathering and all our pretty faces together. So I would like first to ask Jen if you would like to comment on today's presentations and have your word.
Yeah, my goodness, what beautiful things have been said. Maria, thank you so much. And you know, you can't give a gift unless you have a receiver that can really use what you've given, and a creative receiver. And you have been that. You were that amazing ability to give again, you know, to all of these women that you interviewed. And that was really, it was a great success. I have to say, Maria, how much good you did. And Katarina also. It was a wonderful project, and it showed the women's alternative. We are really an alternative, the feminist alternative. And yeah, I became a feminist in Italy. I learned feminism in Italy, which was a deep and radical revolutionary feminism. So that's that. Thank you. And thank you, Selene, for your wonderful speech, talking and teaching us more about the details of our interaction and our naming our vulnerability and the ability to receive the vulnerability of others in our life capacity. So I think it was very informative to hear what you said. And I'm going to think about it more and cite you in my things I write. As I will Maria too, actually. So thank you both so much.
Okay, I invite Liliana now to facilitate and bring us your questions and the questions for our presenters. Liliana Wilson is our facilitator.
Yes, thank you, Elena. So the first question is from Laura, and her her comment is, great message for us and for the three panelists. Is nonverbal communication a form of gifting? This is any of the panelists or the three of you want to answer, that would be great.
Well, I can try to answer it. I think receiving nonverbal communication, that is, as we watch other people do what they're doing, or breathe the pheromones that are in the atmosphere that they give out without even realizing it. All the actions, the body postures, all of the nonverbal communication that we do, we receive that as a gift. We may not even know that we're paying attention to it, but it informs us. That means it comes into our internal form and tells us about that other person. So it is a gift to us, even if we don't realize that it is, because we do receive it, even though we don't realize we're receiving it and they don't realize they're giving it. So that's my thought about nonverbal communication.
Can I add something? I
Of
just want to
course.
say, have you ever given someone a hug? But this is something is communicated through the hug. So or have you ever smiled across a room to someone? Something is communicated. Maybe it's reassurance, maybe it's you got this, you know, or maybe it's wow, I'm so happy to see you. And have you ever experienced the pleasure of receiving these across a room or within a hug, or also someone that you love, maybe they have a scowl or a frown on their face. This is communicating something to you, and it's a gift because it's important to me to know what's going on inside of the people that I care about, so I can offer them gifts. Are you not feeling well? Can I make you a cup of tea? So their nonverbal communication is gifts to me because it supports me in offering them gifts.
Say something. I don't know who asked the question and if I interpret it right, but my perception is that it's a very good question because it requires also to address what I think is when it's a reaction. When the nonverbal communication is a reaction to not being able to do what Selene was saying, to be transparent, or I don't know the word that you use, but to be honest to yourself. And so it's still a gift, but it's not the best gift. Because the best gift is what Selene is saying, to try to express it in the best way that people can understand it. See, the problem is that nonverbal communication is it's natural, but it's also very cultural. And so we can get quite confused. And when we are bilingual and when we have had to interact with many languages, especially, and cultures, we begin to understand that nonverbal communication is natural. It expresses a lot, but it's harder to explain that when you can use all other means to do it. For example, when it comes with love, when it comes from a reaction that is about, and I remember, I'll just give an example. I remember a workshop that I had to organize in Thailand with women from India, and we had 2 days to put together a workshop for 50 women that were coming from all over about communication. And I had to work with 3 women from India. And so we were putting together the program, and I would make a suggestion and the 3 of them would go like this. And to us, that means no. So finally, after the 3rd suggestion, I stopped and I said to them, hey, if you don't agree with the proposals, make a proposal yourselves, because we only have another day to put this together. But we are agreeing with you. And so that solved the issue. And I think it's very important that the gifts come as clear as possible. And that's what Genevieve was talking about. Why is it that we get confused about when it's gifts and when it's not? Because there are a lot of other interactions that have to do with it that we have to sift. No, sift is not the word. Decipher to be able to communicate the best way as a gift for being able to interact with each other fully, wholly in life.
Thank you, everyone. I see there is a lot of moving going on. We have several more questions. Liliana, please.
Yes, I'm ready. From Maria Gaforio to Selene and all the other panelists. I know that in capitalist norms, it isn't considered professional to talk about your own well-being or needs when you are in a presenter or leader role. And I'm aware that you choose not to go by those sorts of standards. And I wonder if you can talk about whether and how this choice is related to your gift consciousness or nonviolence practice.
Yeah, I can respond. The choice to reveal my vulnerability, even when I'm in a leadership role or have been hired to do a job, I think it's actually connected to both my gift consciousness and my nonviolence practice. I think initially it grew out of my commitment to nonviolence because I believe that nonviolence starts with the spirit, with the self, and I have an intention. I don't always manage to do it, but I have an intention to be nonviolent towards myself, and that includes, care for my body and care for my well-being. So I think it starts from my practice of nonviolence, but it grew into a gift because if I kind of break the ice, so to speak, or if I start with revealing my vulnerability or talking about my well-being, it is a gift that kind of opens the door for other people to then care for their well-being or name how they are or bring those soft qualities into spaces where they wouldn't normally be. So it's a little of both.
Thank you, Selene. Are there more questions, Liliana?
Yes. I have another question from Laura, and she says, very interesting perspective. I wonder if all of you could elaborate about the communications industry and advertising. How does the gift economy function there?
I think that's a question for all
All
the
of them.
three of you. So yeah,
I will address them.
we will start. Maria, please.
So that's a very good question. Well, the communication in that world has become a corporation, and not only a corporation, but a practice of exchange for the sake of turning communication into a money-making machine. And so it doesn't have anything to do with the gift, but there are many, I have met many women and some men in that industry that are trying to work within it to be able to do a good job about communicating in that industry that has used to have, until the advent of the internet, the only social communication globally that we had access to. And therefore, that's where we learned as humanity in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, where we thought that the world was turning only exchange, only capitalism, and only patriarchy. I have known some of those people. I have known some of those women and have met them trying to do it within that corporate communication business that is doing so much harm because it only caters to patriarchal and capitalist politics. Having alternative media has been critical to that because most people do not communicate in those terms. But if the industry is organized that way, then people begin to, just like capitalism, people begin to think that that's the way that everybody is going. So having alternative media and having people inside there that are trying to do a good job about communicating and allowing for different voices to be heard, and allowing for a communication that is not only about feeding the money-making machine of communication is important. With fake news now, it's a different thing, and maybe we can address it another time, but it's very complicated because it's distorting communications even more in a way that is so manipulative that it's destroying its own industry.
Jen, please.
Yes. Well, there's another question there, which is what is lying in the theory of the gift economy? And lying is giving in order to receive, not giving in order to satisfy the need of the other. That when you tell the truth, you're satisfying the other person's need to know what to do, to know the world around them. When you lie, you're satisfying your own needs for some other motive than satisfying that other person's actual need. So you have a second end, a second motivation. And it's like exchange, where you give in order to receive. You communicate in order to have something, some kind of advantage from that. And that's just what advertising does. The advertising is made to manipulate the other person to get something back. And it's usually money, and it's usually the very advertising itself is paid for in the price of the product that you're selling, which is like a double whammy. And that is happening also with the political communication now, which is just terrible. I mean, we're living in the world of the lie. So many lies. It's all the airwaves is full of lies. And the reason they say these things is also to get advertisers to invest in their businesses, as well as to get political candidates to win. And the people that manipulate better are the ones that get more money. It's just totally crazy. We're in a very sick society of advertising and manipulation of the truth by the media. So fake news and all of that is all just pretty terrible. And how can we get out of this? How can we find who we should vote for? How can we find what we should think, even, I mean, of what's going on around us? And the truth is hard to find. So I think we need to realize what a soup of lies we're living in, and try to find some gifting way out, the gift of truth that will take us out.
Selene?
How did you know I wanted to say something? I was just deciding not to say anything.
I've heard your thoughts.
I actually do want to respond to the question about lying, but from a very different perspective. My stepmom said that I was a perfect child, except that I lied. I think what she meant was I was obedient. And so I want to share this from somebody who used to kind of call myself a liar. I remember lying as a child, and I think Genevieve is right. It was self-protection. I was very afraid of punishment and corporal punishment, and so I would say things that I knew were lies reflexively, because I thought that would be like the answer that would want to be heard by my parents. And I do think that, and I would get caught in lies sometimes, and sometimes I wouldn't. And then I would be punished. So it was a tragic strategy to protect myself from punishment, because it didn't work. But I do think that there was actually a gift for my caregivers in the lying, if they had the perspective or the skill to notice. I wish that there had been a question like, this child I'm caring for is lying a lot, and I wonder what's going on with that. And I think the gift in it could have been like a plea for help, like a plea for the something in the relationship not working. And I think that similarly, on the larger scale, we could take that same idea of like the amount of lies that we're surrounded in the world might actually be like a plea for help, a red flag, something like Jen said, like a sickness in our world. And I wish that we could orient the way that I wished I had been oriented to, like, what is the plea for help behind these lies?
Well, if money weren't involved, maybe I'd agree with you. There's so much money comes through lying.
Yes, yes, but why do people need the strategy of money? What is the fear that behind them wanting the money?
That's
It's a
huge
rhetorical question. We
No,
don't
it's
have to
huge.
answer it.
And it takes I guess takes a long time to talk about. You want to, I can tell you a little bit about what I think.
Yeah.
I think that when we give to people, we give value to them. You know, when you satisfy somebody else's need, you're paying attention to them, and that, especially with children, they receive that attention, and that gives them self-esteem, because you wouldn't have given to them unless they were important for you. So they have a kind of intrinsic value for you. And in exchange, you don't actually, you give value to yourself. So in capitalism, I think it is that the people who make the most money feel like they have gotten the most gifts without actually recognizing them as gifts. In fact, they think they've made the money themselves. They've given, and they have more value than anybody else. So everybody's always trying to get more value for more self-esteem. And monetary value, if you have billions, you seem to be more important than everybody else. Actually, you know, you're just another human being that happens to have followed that particular path. I believe maybe that is part of the reason why people lie in order to get more of that value that they think is coming to them through getting more stuff. Yeah.
Liliana, what are
Yes.
other questions that our audience is interested in?
Yeah, from Ciola Bromley to all the panelists, I wonder what the panelists think about reciprocity. In Stone Age Economics, 1972, anthropologist Marshall Salins identified three modes of reciprocity: generalized reciprocity, balanced reciprocity, negative reciprocity. And in psychology, reciprocity is a universally accepted social rule. Reciprocity is the practice of exchanging things for mutual benefit. It involves treating others the way that they treat us. Is quid pro quo reciprocity or a type of reciprocity? And why do you think humans default into thinking quid pro quo thought?
I think Jen probably could speak more to reciprocity, but I think that I think it might be, it's one interpretation of the archaeological evidence that we might interpret differently as Genevieve has said, unilateral giving and receiving, which could, for somebody who is used to living in an exchange world, they might call it exchange, or they might call it reciprocity. And I don't want to say a lot because I'd like Jen to be able to answer. But mostly I just want to say I really hope not to necessarily treat people how they treat me, because with my wanting to practice nonviolence, I hope to model more gift-based ways of treating each other to create the culture that I want to live in. Yeah, I just think that reciprocity can lead to, might be an interpretation that came out of exchange, the exchange paradigm.
Can I say something about that before Genevieve?
Sure.
Just an experience, just the experience of our indigenous Brivi and Quebecer community in Costa Rica, in the highlands of Talamanca. They have a ritual that is called Mano Vuelta. And Mano Vuelta in Spanish means that when you are giving your hand is like this to give whatever, because it's a symbol of something that you are or you have, and you give. And then when you need, your hand is turned over. I'm trying to do it. And your hand is turned over this way to receive. That ritual is really amazing, because the reciprocity is not a give and take in reactive immediate ways necessarily, but it is a recognition. And I believe that that comes from, that's why I agree with Selene that we have to reinterpret anthropology from the perspective of indigenous and what we call primitive communities, being able to explain and express their paradigms in the gift giving. Because what Mano Vuelta means is that we recognize that as human beings of a community of people and of other beings, we all have gifts to give, and we all have needs to meet. We all have them. And that is a great humbleness and humbleness that we have to recognize. That it's not that we are, like Genevieve was saying, we think that what we have is because we are so great. But it is, we ourselves are a gift of nature to do something in this planet. And when we know what that is for the good of all of nature and the whole of the planet, then, you know, we can do well and be very happy even in the midst of everything that's going on, but because we're doing something about it. And so this concept of our Brevi and Quebecer people of Mano Vuelta, to me, has been really critical in understanding or finding a traditional expression of what this gift giving and reciprocity in it is all about, which is about recognizing humbly that we all need at some times, very often, and we all have oftentimes and very often, and we have to, and the willingness to be able to enter that interaction as such is really critical, because we have to be conscious of the needs of ourselves and others, and we have to be conscious of what are our gifts that we have to share, and be able to be open to do it.
Yeah,
Jen.
yeah, I think also, you know, people talk about when mothers give to children, they call it an exchange, the exchange between mother and child. The child responds, it's an exchange. It's really not an exchange. It's giving and receiving and responding to that. And it's the interpretation of everything as an exchange rather than actually, I think with the children, it's more imitation of what the mother is doing and responding to what she's doing, rather than an obligation to exchange. The child doesn't feel obliged. And that is the same, I believe, also in so much of giving and receiving also as adults. We may feel an obligation to exchange because our society is so much based on exchange and so much based on, you know, feeling obliged to give back if somebody gives to you, and you don't even want to receive anything because you're afraid you're going to be obliged to give back. And instead, what we need to do is just imitate the giving and give ourselves when we can, and then other people imitate us, and it goes around. And I believe that is actually what they call generalized reciprocity. It just means the gifts are going around in the community, and you're not obliged as you would be in the market economy to give and give back. So it's not quid pro quo. It's a community, a communication rather than an obligation.
Can I add something briefly to this question about reciprocity? I'm noticing actually a painful sensation in my chest as I imagine that someone is giving to me out of reciprocity. It's actually painful for me. because I don't want someone to give to me because I gave to them. I want someone to actually want to give to me. And in fact, I actually want that so much that I actually support other people when I'm asking for something or when I'm in relationship with them. And I say, please don't do this if you don't actually want to do it, even though it means I'm going without the thing I'm asking for. I want someone to want to give to me, not to give to me because they think they should or because I gave to them and now they're just returning the favor. That feels really yucky. And I think that we feel that pain all the time, like the inner child that wants to know that they matter and that someone just loves them and wants to give to them doesn't go away. We always have that inner child that wants to know that they matter. We just get so used to that kind of being covered up that we don't notice that pain anymore. But I really want someone to give to me only when they actually want to.
Thank you, Selene. Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
but why? Can I say something about that? I agree with that, but I think that the important, that's why I insist that the paradigm behind that kind of relationship is really critical, because we were talking about this last week in another group, and I raised the issue that the problem with exchange, and in this case, digamos, reciprocity, placed in the paradigm of exchange, the problem with it is not only that exchange. The main problem that we have to unravel is that we have to begin to measure in monetary or exchange ways the value of things that cannot be measured in money or in exact exchange. I don't know if I understand myself very well, but it's the measurement. I mean, what is the value of caring for the elder? $10 an hour? You know, what is the value? And so when the reciprocity has another meaning, when you are talking about you can be very gift giving and generous to me, and in recognizing that, I can decide to give you a gift. The difference is if I want something back, then it becomes what Genevieve was saying. So again, I go back that in order to understand the full depth of what we are talking about, we need to address the paradigms, not only the paradigm of gift and exchange, but all of the paradigms that are behind it: capitalism, patriarchy, exploitation, and all of that.
Big questions here. I think we have time for one more little question, and then we have to wrap up our salon.
Okay. There's a question from Patricia Hurd to all the panelists. I wonder if exchange might be possible in a good way if we're not aiming for profit and for getting more than we give. Anybody?
Well, yeah, you know, even in societies that are based on gift economy, like indigenous societies or pre-market economies, I think there may be some exchange. Sometimes you give because you give somebody something because they're not going to give you what you want without you giving them something. But it's not generalized. You know, even in any society, that any community, you probably have a whole lot of gifting, and there may be a way of going outside the community to another community where you take gifts and they receive those gifts, and then they give you gifts and you bring them back to your community. So that is a kind of an exchange, but it's in your community itself, you're giving and receiving. You're not actually doing quid pro quo. So I think that it can happen. that exchange can be used. But it's when it becomes the whole, what they call the social nexus, the whole link of society among people, and spreads as the only right thing to do, then it becomes really awful, also because it hides the kind of exploitation of gifts that's going on as the gifts of all go through the exchange mechanism and become profit for the capitalists and get sucked out of the whole economy, so that there are less gifts for other people to give. So it really is, we have to look at the big picture as well as at the individual picture, as well as possible alternative communities.
Can I add to this? I think I want to add that there are other consequences to the exchange paradigm beyond an extraction-based profit model, which is, I think Genevieve is pointing to it, which is the loss of relationality, like the loss of connection, the loss of togetherness. So when this is again the thing why I'm not drawn to reciprocity even. Like I'm imagining in indigenous cultures, even if they were doing trade, that there was still some relationality to the trade. And I would want I would want it to be known that if we're stepping into exchange, we're losing connection, we're losing togetherness, and it can be quite painful. And someone might want to do that. Maybe it's a survival situation. You know, I might have an exchange relationship with, you know, Google. I use it because it helps me survive in this world, and I just consciously know that like Google doesn't really care when it's my birthday. You know, there isn't a relationship there, and I can consciously choose that. And still, I want to be, as much as possible, moving the culture that I swim in towards more and more relationship. And I think that that is part of the global crisis that we're in, is that we've exited relationship with each other, and we've exited relationship with the planet and switched to exchange, kind of taking, and that loss of seeing the impacts on each other when we receive a gift or give a gift. Like there's so much else going on. There's like the joy, the nourishing, I feel nourished, I'm happy, you're happy. There's so much else going on that we lose when we step into an exchange model.
Maria, do you have something you would like to add?
No, yeah, maybe I'm sorry, this is at the end because I think it's going to be another salon. And, you know, Guadalupe is here with me and we're discussing this in the sideline, and it's very interesting. I would like to say that I agree with what you're saying about the trickiness of reciprocity and exchange. When you go into the paradigm issue, what we in Oceana, the project that Guadalupe and I are constructing about the waters of the planet, we are calling the paradigm interactive symbiosis. And it requires trust and belief that that is the way that all of the species and the life of the planet can live in harmony, in equilibrium, and regain it when we lose it, because we lose equilibrium even within our own ecological, personal, bodily system when we get sick and so on. So it's not a permanent status. That we need interaction but that interaction that recognizes that there's a symbiosis, and it requires a lot of trust. And so, you know, it's it's not another issue, but it's something that I would like to see a discussion, Genevieve, maybe not right now. Well, it can't be right now, but about the other paradigms that are in your construction of the gift economy paradigm, because we talk about them all the time. We recognize the role of patriarchy in all of this, the role of capitalism, and we have to address them at the paradigmatic approach, because that is what Genevieve is contributing with the gift economy. It's at the paradigmatic level that translates into the way we live. And I would love a discussion about all of the other paradigms that are at play.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, great.
Next
Guadalupe?
time, another time.
Yeah.
Maria, there was a briefly just a question in the chat if you were saying interactive symbiosis, and that was a term that you used.
Interactive symbiosis, yes. Interactive
great.
symbiosis.
Thank you, Maria. We might have a salon on that, so we can plan. If you have any ideas, if you like our salon, if you want to comment on our salon, please reach out, write to us. You can write to maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. We are so happy to receive your feedback and all your questions, comments, ideas. That would be really appreciated. So we have 10 more minutes, and I would like to invite our presenters, our speakers to say their, let's say, conclusions, final words, or inspirational things, so we can actually come to the closure of our salon. Who would like to start first? Well, I would like
How
to
long
invite
do we have?
Maria, please.
2 minutes? No, Guadalupe wants to do it. I'm gonna give her my time. Come and sit.
Okay.
I wanna
Great.
give her my
Guadalupe,
time.
welcome.
This is Guadalupe Urbina, but we can't
Okay.
see you.
Hi,
Guadalupe,
Guadalupe.
you froze.
Okay, thank you. Just when I see around what is surrounding me, I have around in nature, it's just confidence. That is the most. Oh, what about the connection is not going well?
Now we can see
It's
you.
okay. It's okay now.
Okay, yeah, so one of the things that I can see surrounding me here or everywhere is that there is only one rule to live in all this diversity of the planet, which is confidence. And this is not easy. There are a lot of blind animals in nature, a lot of blind animals, and some of them they don't have eyes. Even they have another kind of conditions or privilege to live without eyes. Without confidence, there is no possible to survive in the planet, because all we are in need permanently. We need air to breathe, and we are not producing that air. We need water. We are not producing water from my body. So at the moment when the patriarchy took advantage of all these gifts and decided to possess all these gifts, they could invent something to exchange that overvalued for us. Just we have to pay a lot of money to receive the things we need. And I think, ¿cómo se dice humildad, María?
Humbleness.
Yeah, humbleness is one of the most difficult things in human beings, to accept how we need, how we are in need. I mean, we cannot fly as an eagle high in the mountains to see. We cannot see our food 2 kilometers far, flying on the air. We have a lot of needs, just needs. There are animals that they just are born and immediately they begin to walk. And they are looking for the milk in the mama, some mammals, you know. So thinking of this, the big lesson I see and I feel, because it's important to feel, not only to think in what we need, but what I feel, what I really need. I need to be loved. I need to be accompanied. I need to eat. I need, exchange mind, ideas. What is the only thing? I mean, the nature, you belong to nature. We are not a part of nature. We belong to nature. So we are nature. In this case, we need to be humble just to accept.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We are always needing.
Thank you. Thank you, Guadalupe. It was nice to have your word, and we are so happy to have you in our salon. It's extemporary. It's a little gift from Maria as well, and from you. So thank you so much. Selene.
Yeah, just to wrap up, remembering that communication is a gift that we give. Our listening is a gift that we give, and also communicating allows the flow of other gifts to happen. Specifically, the gift of attunement, where we can actually attune our gift giving to your specific needs and preferences and what works for you or what you need in the moment, so our gifts can be more accurate.
Thank you, Selene. Jen?
Yeah, thank you all so much. The beautiful words, beautiful thoughts of everybody, and very useful ones. And I can tell from this salon and from many others that we really do have an alternative paradigm. It's already there, that women particularly have this other paradigm that has not been acknowledged and received by this patriarchal capitalist society that is creating a disaster of the beautiful earth and the beautiful humanity. And so we have the duty now to find this other paradigm in our daily lives and in what we think of as the planetary problems, and understand it and do things differently, and tell other people also, so that we can create a movement, huge movement away from the patriarchal capitalist thinking and paradigm, and solve these huge problems that are out there. And we can do it. And it is in actually the hands of women and of the men that support the women, and the men that also want the gift paradigm. So, and practice it. So that is my desire and hope and wish from all of these salons, that we will be able to do that and recognize this other paradigm that is there, that we are as humans. We already are that as humans. We already are Homo donans, the gifting being, and not Homo economicus, and not even Homo sapiens. As I said, we don't even know who we are actually, so we're not sapiens. We need to recognize that we are a different species than what we've thought of as our patriarchal capitalist being.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your wisdom. It was really intense. So thank you, Maria Suarez. Thank you, Selene Aswell. Thank you, Genevieve Vaughan. And
Thank
special
you,
thank you, special thank you to Liliana Wilson. If you want to show us your pretty face, that would be much appreciated, for facilitating and providing questions for us. Special thanks to our amazing tech support. Hi, Liliana. Diane Weidenkopf, She is, yeah, in the back of all, in the backstage. And she is actually, we are on the show, but she's running the show. I wish to thank so much, specifically Letitia Layson, the mistress of ceremony of our salons, and we miss her so much. Thank you, Letitia, for preparing my memos and sheets so I could actually facilitate this salon, and Letitia prepared everything so that I could smoothly replace her on this occasion. I am, as you could see, probably reading a lot of stuff, and it was all prepared by Letitia. So I am her double today, her shadow. My name is Elena Skoko. I wish to thank International Feminists for a Gift Economy Network and each of you for joining us. Please join us again in 2 weeks, October 29th, for the Salon number 38. That will be about the gifts from the Global Matriarch Gathering. You won't miss that. Let me remind you that the video recording of today's salon will be posted on our website, maternalgifteconomymovement.org. And if you would like to be notified of our upcoming salons and events, sign up for our notification mailing list at our website, again, maternalgifteconomymovement.org. And I see you had a lot of thoughts going on, so you can share that. Share them with us. You can write us an email at maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. So if you want to dig deeper in the maternal gift economy as a theory and practice, you can find more information on the website gift-economy.com. It was all from us. Thank you so much, everyone, and hope to see you in the next salons. Bye, everyone.